Hello, my name is Caroline Dorr and I'm an educational psychologist. Welcome to the video on climate anxiety. This is designed for parents and carers to increase knowledge and understanding about the effects of climate anxiety and how these can be experienced by our children. In this video, we will look briefly at climate change and the primary causes and impacts of this on our day-to-day life. We will get a good understanding of climate anxiety and how it differs from other forms of anxiety, and look at the ways to support children and young people who are experiencing this. Finally, we will look at small actions we can take both to help reduce climate anxiety and to make improvements to the environment. I'll also be including some signposting to further information that you can refer to later on if you're interested. In essence, climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns. This can have significant consequences to our experience of the world, and in recent years there have been increasingly frequent instances of intense drought, flooding, wildfires, storms, and water shortages. In addition to the effects we can see and experience intensely, other more subtle changes are occurring that can have catastrophic consequences for the future, including rising sea levels and declining biodiversity. Climate change is not new, and there have been changes triggered by natural causes occurring since before the age of dinosaurs. Volcanic activity, solar cycles, and tectonic plate shifting has had significant impacts on the Earth's climate, including causing the start and end of the Ice Age. However, the rate of climate change has grown exponentially since the Industrial Revolution, with humans using fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and gas to energise modern life. Research by the Natural Resources Defence Council suggests that the annual combined human activity has an effect on the climate that is 100 times greater than any naturally caused release of carbon. Climate change can impact us at a range of levels, and we in the UK are seeing these impacts more and more frequently over recent years. Direct impacts refer to occurrences that are directly caused by weather changes as a response to climate change. This includes flooding and landslides due to heavy rain, wildfires due to extreme heat waves and droughts, and tropical storms. Even this year, there are examples of UK-based direct impacts of climate change. Secondary impacts of climate change relate more to the knock-on effects of extremes in weather. For example, increased rainfall leads to flood damage to roads and potholes, which has subsequent impacts on how local councils spend money and how well our cars survive the winter months. On the other side, reduced rainfall due to heat waves reduce the country's water reserves, leading to hosepipe bans. Changes in weather also have implications for food crops, causing gaps on our supermarket shelves or increases in price for the produce that did make it to the shop floor. All of this can cause emotional distress, whether it is due to worries about housing and concerns about flooding, fears over rising food prices or food availability, frustration over government spending, or general dismay over the state of the planet. The indirect impact of climate change is that as we learn more about it, we experience more emotions in relation to it. Fiona Charlson and colleagues in 2022 suggested that the climate crisis is recognised as the biggest threat to mental health in the coming century. Part of this rising threat is through the experience of climate anxiety, sometimes called eco-anxiety. This is considered to be a specific form of anxiety relating to stress or distress caused by environmental changes and our knowledge of them. This means that climate anxiety is more likely to be experienced by people who are aware of the climate crisis. Climate anxiety can affect anyone and can be triggered by a range of experiences, such as exposure to pictures or stories about natural disasters, first-hand experience of a direct impact of climate change, or seeing environmental changes within your local area. Feeling distressed or anxious about our world is normal and shows that we care about the planet. But sometimes these feelings can be overwhelming and hard to deal with. It is important to emphasise that climate anxiety is not a diagnosable condition and is different from other forms of anxiety. Caroline Hickman, a researcher into eco-anxiety, was clear in 2024 that these environmental anxieties have overlaps with medical conditions such as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety, but are not clinical disorders in themselves. Instead, they are thought to be an emotionally healthy response to environmental problems. Whether or not you agree, there are some commonly understood symptoms or shared experiences associated with climate anxiety, such as those listed on this slide. Feelings of anxiety and panic, as well as pessimism and frustration, are common, alongside thoughts about the enormity of the task and a sense of responsibility to act. Widely accepted theory into anxiety in any form recognizes the relationship between our thoughts, our feelings, our bodily sensations, and our behaviors. Each of these factors has influence on the other and is influenced by the others, oftentimes leading to a complex web of experience. How we respond to different experiences is often unique to us and is determined by our own values, self-identity, and previous experiences. Take, for example, watching a news report about the positive work a volunteer group has done to replant trees. This could make you feel happy that this group has made a difference, and your thoughts might indicate a sense of hope for the future. You might feel calm and relaxed in your body, and your behaviour might be to see if you can get involved in similar projects, or simply tell another person about this news. In contrast, imagine the news report spoke instead about the harm that single-use plastics were having to marine life. You might feel sad for the animals or frustrated towards people who litter. Rather than calm and relaxed, you might experience an increased heart rate, and you might feel the urge to cry or shout out. This news might call you to action in how you use and dispose of plastics, or incite you to attend a local beach clean to stop more waste entering the sea. Research into climate anxiety, this time with a specific focus on the experiences of children and young people, has found that this is a growing concern for many. Susan Clayton and colleagues in 2014 suggested that children are at greater risk from climate anxiety due to their reduced capacity to take action independent of the adults around them. They can experience what is called layering, where they are not only experiencing the effects of climate change themselves, but also experience the effects of climate change on their parents and carers, increasing the risk of distress and a sense of hopelessness. This can lead to the entering of a freeze state, or something that Glenn Albrecht referred to as eco-paralysis, where the anxiety or distress around the climate becomes so intense it is as though the whole body and mind shut down to protect themselves from the enormity of the problem. A survey conducted by Children's Show Newsround shortly before the COVID-19 pandemic found that 80% of children and young people aged 8 to 16 years old view climate change as important to them. Furthermore, 73% of the 2,000 respondents indicated worry over the state of the planet. More recently, Susan Clayton and Brian Cariza in 2020 found that children and young people, as well as young adults, generally show higher levels of climate anxiety and climate concern compared to older generations. So, what can we do? First, we want to make sure that we are not labelling this anxiety as a problem or as something that needs to be solved and resolved. As we've said, unlike many other forms of anxiety, climate anxiety is predominantly considered to be an emotionally healthy response to environmental problems. But that doesn't mean to say that we do nothing. Instead, what research and experience tells us is that we have to focus on validating the thoughts and feelings and responding to the distress. Just because it may be emotionally healthy doesn't mean that it's okay for it to consume us or to overwhelm our capacity to think about and do other things. Oftentimes, the strategies that support climate action and environmental change are also the strategies that improve climate anxiety by identifying what we ourselves as individuals, families, and communities can do to support positive change within our local area. Empowering children and young people to think about and enact small, impactful changes in their lives can help develop their resilience to anxiety symptoms and make them feel that they are making a difference. Some of you may already be familiar with the principles of emotion coaching. For those that aren't, this is an approach developed by researcher John Gottman into how different parenting styles support emotional regulation and relational connection. He advocates for the emotion coach parent, and this is a model that we can easily apply to thinking about conversations we may have with our children about climate change and climate anxiety. We start with noticing the behaviour and tuning in to the potential emotions underneath. In psychology, we often use the phrase, behaviour is a function of communication, and this invites us to think about where we might be and what might be going on for the child or young person. What are they doing or saying that leads us to wonder if they're experiencing climate anxiety? Next, we aim to listen empathetically. We want to be sure to understand their point of view and how they've reached it. Here, we want to provide a curious and non-judgmental space for them to talk about anything and everything that might be bothering them. Emotions about the environment are normal and valid, and are generally an indication that the child or young person is connected to the natural world or that they're worried about their future. For some children and young people, they might already know how they're feeling and might have the language to describe this clearly. For other children, the complexity of emotions associated with climate change may be creating a sense of overwhelm. Providing vocabulary for them to use or not use can help them to make sense of how they're feeling, further normalizing their experience. Finally, we want to support regulation. It can be so easy to rush to this step, and as parents and carers, it can be horrible to see our loved ones distressed. However, fixing climate anxiety is tricky, as the ultimate fix is to fix climate change. So rather than moving to the solving stage, we want to ensure that the child or young person has the skills they need to regulate their emotions when these are feeling particularly intense. We also might want to support them to think about the ways that they can reduce their anxiety by increasing their resilience to distress or through climate action activities. Sometimes emotion coaching can sound easy enough to read about, but hard to put into practice. On the slide here, I've shared some examples about how emotion coaching can be used to explore different emotions associated with climate change.
I understand why you're angry. I feel angry too. It's okay to feel angry. Sometimes it is helpful to use our anger to ask for the changes we want to see. I wonder if taking some action would be helpful. Shall we see if there is a campaign we can get involved in? Or maybe a local citizen science project we could volunteer with?
I can hear that you are feeling really overwhelmed by all the information about climate change and that you're feeling hopeless about the future. Sometimes we can feel like there are just so many problems and we're just one person. It can be overwhelming. Is there something we can do together to help the climate that feels important? Like eating vegetarian one day a week or making sure we're recycling properly?
I can see you seem really down about the loss of wildlife. Is it maybe a sadness or a grief for something you really care about? You have a beautiful heart and it's okay to cry. Are there other animal species that you think need protecting?
Here I must credit Dr. Louise Edgington from Climate EdSci for her work linking emotion coaching principles to climate anxiety support. To reduce the impact of anxiety, there are a number of things children and young people can do to boost their resilience to distress. Taken from research into protective and compensatory experiences to mitigate distress caused by adversity, there are 10 recommended features of day-to-day life that can promote resilience. Unconditional love from family, opportunities for and access to learning, having a hobby, being active, especially if this activity can take place outside, having a social group and having time to spend with others, having a positive role model to look up to, ensuring that basic needs such as shelter, food, water, sleep are met consistently, having a predictable routine, and having opportunities to help others. It may be helpful to reflect on your own resilience in relation to these factors, as well as the resilience of your child or teenager. Are there any features suggested here that could be improved upon to boost well-being? Other strategies include limiting news access, either through unfollowing of certain news sites on social media or through capping the amount of time spent on social media, therefore preventing doom scrolling. Social media and the internet can also be a good source of good news. And I've listed some links that provide regular good news stories about the planet and what people are doing to care for it. When those anxiety symptoms do come and begin to overwhelm us, there are things we can do in the moment to take back control. There are things our children and young people can do, either independently or with us, to help regulate and return to a state of calm. Controlled breathing is a great first start, focusing on our breath as it moves in through our nose and out through our mouth. It might be helpful to use a visual, like the one on the slide, to regulate the pace of our breath, or we might prefer to count. Grounding techniques can be great to keep our thoughts from spiraling away from us. These tools help us to stay in the present moment. A simple one to do and remember is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. 5 things we can see, 4 things we can hear, 3 things we can feel, 2 things we can smell, and 1 thing we can taste. These techniques can also help us to connect with the natural world around us. Channeling anxiety into action can be a great way of shifting our thoughts from the hopeless to the helpful. Sometimes this can be doing something in the moment that can make a difference, like going on a quick litter pick or researching a climate action campaign to get involved in. Other times, it might be about planning ahead and scheduling some time later in the day or week for one of these activities. This can be especially important if anxiety symptoms come at night before bedtime. Working to plan for something we can do the next day can give us the calm that enables us to get a good night's sleep. Feeling connected to nature benefits us in many ways, and there is a wealth of research looking at how it supports well-being. The research has evidence for improved self-regulation, self-esteem, social skills, creativity, attention, engagement, and resilience in the children and young people who have taken part in nature-based activities to develop nature connection, even when nature connection itself has not increased. These included activities such as walking and reflecting in nature, connecting with nature using the senses, creative art activities, nature kindergartens and nurseries, forest schools, and forest bathing. As we've said, sometimes the steps to manage and reduce climate anxiety are the same as the steps towards climate action. Oftentimes, when we think about climate action, we focus on the big changes and worry that we can't always make these changes, like getting an electric car or only using solar panels. This can be really unattainable for us. However, there are some really accessible changes that we can make to our daily lifestyle and habits that can have a really positive impact on the environment. Things like avoiding products that contain palm oil, reducing food waste, and saying no to single-use plastics can be really positive in the long term. Whilst it's sometimes about some people making big changes, it is also about lots of people making small changes. For the most part, we've spoken about climate anxiety within children and young people who are otherwise able to engage with day-to-day routines as normal. These strategies we've discussed will support them to normalise their thoughts and feelings about climate change and the environmental crisis, as well as make positive changes to their connection with nature. However, it is important to consider when further support may be required. Research from Caroline Hickman in 2024 proposes a critical level of eco-anxiety or climate anxiety that would warrant onward referral for professional support. Signs that further support is required includes intrusive thoughts and worries about the survival of the human race, extreme behaviours and engagement in activism, or thoughts of suicide. If someone you care about is presenting with any of the signs on the slide, encourage them to seek psychological support. I've included on the slide some websites and organisations to be aware of to support with any further questions and information. Parents for Future UK and Teach the Future are both organisations aimed at campaigning for change and for improvements for future generations. Based in the UK, they have both online and in-person events and are great sources of information and support. Climate EdPsych, Climate Psychology Alliance, and Mind Ed for Families focus on emotional well-being and have resources and activities that can provide therapeutic support if needed for parents and carers, and children and young people. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. Here is the link to our website for more information about our work towards supporting communities and conservation projects. Thanks again.